Hello there, everyone. My name is Elaine Young. I am a certified yoga therapist helping women restore balance from depletion, stress, and chronic pain using yoga therapy and lifestyle transformations. So, our topic today is a continuation of our conversation from a while ago, a few weeks ago, about tension along our spine. And our last conversation, which is the link underneath, is tension in the tailbone and what does it actually tell us? So, just as a recap, tension in our tailbone is an emotional clue that we are or have undergone certain levels of fear and levels of uncertainty that causes the region in our tailbone to tighten and grip. I use the analogy of a dog who is afraid and stressed out with its tail tucked under. And similarly, our bodies are still hardwired to have the similar stress response. Some of the long-term effects of tight tailbone will be chronic lower back pain, chronic hip and pelvis tension, tailbone pain, pelvic pain, sciatica, spinal compression, neck and shoulder tension, because it does travel upward, headaches, numbness in the lower spine, pelvic region. The tighter and contracted state actually cuts off circulation, so we don't actually feel in there, down there somewhere anymore. But also some psychological and emotional impacts, such as being always worrying and constantly anxious, being fearful, and not being able to trust others and not being able to trust ourselves. Needing to always plan ahead and strategize for worst case scenarios, hard to go with the flow and dislike spontaneity, and hard to feel safe in our own bodies. So these are just some of the many effects and impacts downstream for long-term tight tailbone tension. Now, today I'm going to cover a little upstream through the rib cage and in the heart space. Now, this is another area that a lot of us experience tension in the forms of upper back pain, shoulder pain, neck tension, and headaches. Now, it doesn't mean that you just have tension in the heart. Usually it's a combination or it's compounded by tension in the tailbone as well. And that's why I started with the tailbone from the base of our spine. And it has an upstream spiraling effect to affect tension, create vulnerability around our heart regions as well. So why do we often feel tension along the chest and upper back? Well, first of all, already our anatomy is set up in the way that this area through the rib cage, thoracic area, because of the rib cage itself, it's already a little bit more locked in and caged in. This means more protection and more stability because we want to protect our vital internal organs, our heart and our lungs here. But the trade-off is that it then creates rigidity, creates contraction more often because we're trying to protect this region as well. So there's a little trade-off there. It has protection, has stability, but also in return, there's a little bit more rigidity and it's not as easy and mobile in that sense. And on top of that, there is also this emotional protection that we often want to pull ourselves into because that's just how life goes, right? We experience things that are stressful that might hurt us through heartbreak, through loss, sadness, grief, even anger, and a host of other emotions. And every time we have those hurtful experiences, when we don't resolve them, the heart literally builds up an armor around it. And you can see the posture as well changing when we start to kind of wrap ourselves around, cave inwards to protect this very vulnerable region of our hearts. So already we have anatomically, it's already set up in this region to be a little bit more rigid. And then we have life situations that make this area also rigid. And then we have our daily living sitting in front of the computer, computer work, just being used to having this forward slouch position, all of which just compounds into rigid, tense, contracted state and through the upper spine. So it starts from behind the heart, along the upper spine, and it can also create effects and physical symptoms along the neck and head. So what are some physical and emotional aspects of rigid upper spine? So it can manifest into common symptoms such as chronic upper back tension and pain, thoracic kyphosis, that just means a very dramatic rounding of the upper spine, chronic neck tension or pain, chronic headaches and migraines. A lot of times anything happens from the neck up, it's not just because the neck or the head, it really has its source, its root source in the heart. And if we really want to get to the root source, I would say the tailbone, but that's another conversation for another time. Shoulder mobility issues or frozen shoulder, emotional aspects would be things like feeling irrational, quick to anger, again, slow to trust. You don't have that sense of connection and empathy with others. Hesitant to love and receive love, difficulty expressing emotions, and having a harsh inner critic. So again, these are just some physical and emotional aspects of a long-term effect of rigid upper spine. So what happens when the heart space is rigid, numb, and closed off, in addition to all these symptoms? I want to just point out to the fact that in a lot of traditional Eastern traditions, including that of Chinese and Indian traditions, the word of mind alludes to both heart and brain. So when the mind thinks, both the brain and the heart contribute. In our Western culture, when we think of the mind, when we think of thinking, it's a lot in the brain without the heart. And you might argue that, well, heart is irrational, it's emotional. Well, that's because it's rigid and closed off. You can't tap into the wisdom of your heart when it's closed off. And when you're really making wise decisions, it comes with that brain and heart combining together into what we call mind in traditional Chinese and Indian traditions. Now, imagine that your heart is soft and open, and you make decisions based on the wisdom of your heart, based on also the logical, critical thinking of your brain. Won't that make it a lot better in terms of speaking, thinking, and taking actions in this world? So here are ways that you can start to soften your rigid upper spine and consequently your heart space. It is through the practice of spinal release yoga, which I have mentioned before, and this has helped me tremendously in releasing the tightness around the tailbone, my heart region, as a result of my body trying to protect me from things in my past and memories and wounds, psychological wounds that I've experienced. And even though you may not remember all of them, what's very magical about working with the body, and in particular with spinal release yoga, is that you don't need to remember them. You can let the body do its thing, resolve what it's protecting, allow it to slowly unravel in its own time while being completely and utterly supported, feeling safe and secure in your own body. And that will help to resolve any physical manifestations of these wounds and therefore the emotional and psychological wounds. So feel free to check out my 3-part series on spinal release yoga and introduction, which is linked below, and I'll take you through the foundational poses of spinal release yoga, where a lot of it is really just you're lying down in a recliner supportive position and really letting the body return to what it does best, which is to heal. Okay, so it's in the link below, spinal release yoga and introduction. I hope this video in any shape, way, or form has helped inform you and educate you and understand a little bit more, perhaps the tension that's originating in your upper spine and upper back, and give you an idea of where to start to gently coax these tension to release.